Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. So let's start. Hui Yu Hao was very clear that using necromancy and summoning spectral creatures to the Dolor continent were the abilities of an evil soul master in everyone's eyes. However, he couldn't be bothered with his reputation at a time like this, and helping Shrek out of their siege was more important than anything else in the world. He began his necromantic spells. He relied on his formidable spiritual power, and unleashed one of the strongest necromantic spells that the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had left on his spiritual imprints. Spectral Calamity. He couldn't unleash the full strength of Spectral Calamity, because he wasn't strong enough, so he could only summon those relatively weaker spectral creatures. Under such circumstances, they were the limit he could reach with his current strength. Those large black gates opened one after another and connected to the demiplane Electrolux had left behind for him. Hui Yu Hao began to control and command those spectral creatures when they appeared, one after another. He didn't mobilize his spectral army as soon as they appeared. The spectral army needed time to accumulate, and when the day was still bright, he was afraid that his spectral army would cause chaos and panic in Shrek City when they appeared on the battlefield. Therefore, he waited until nightfall and the sky was completely dark, so nobody could clearly see the flatlands from a distance. Only then did Hui Yu Hao command the spectral army that the Spectral Calamity had summoned towards Shrek City. Hui Yu Hao had transformed into the Eye of the Azura, and he had released as much spiritual power as he could. He relied on the demiplane that Electrolux had left behind for him to summon a great many spectral creatures within a short period of time. Hui Yu Hao understood that his spectral army would be no match for this beast tide, because he couldn't summon any top-tier spectral creatures. However, what he had to do now was buy time for Shrek, and he had to delay and hurt the Soul Beast army as much as possible. Only then could he create an opportunity for Shrek to survive. This method was a lot more meaningful and practical than just throwing himself onto the battlefield. Just as Hui Yu Hao had predicted, his spectral army appeared at the most opportune time, because of his meticulous calculations. This army of reinforcements came very suddenly, but at the right time. Hui Yu Hao managed to galvanize and reinvigorate Shrek City's morale. Furthermore, as luck would have it, he had mobilized his spectral army right when the Golden Tree was healing Shrek City's warriors. Shrek City's dire situation was instantly greatly ameliorated. Over on the eastern front, the city wall had been broken through, but Earth-type soul masters swiftly repaired it. The battle was still at its peak. Hui Yu Hao chose to charge in from the northwest, because he had discovered that Bai Ji was too adept with healing on the southern front. Even though he didn't know she was the Emerald Swan, who was ranked number 4 amongst the 10 great savage beasts, he was unwilling to face an adversary like that. His spectral creatures weren't afraid of death, and his most important task was to deal as much damage to the Soul Beast army as possible. Hui Yu Hao's spectral army would achieve a far smaller effect if he attacked on Bai Ji's front. Hui Yu Hao's strange spectral army burst onto the battlefield. Most of them were skeletal soldiers and Jiangxia, who were low-tier undead. However, even though they were considered low-tier, they were still strong. 2 or 3 such undead stacked together had fighting strength comparable to a 10-year soul beast. Other undead, like those headless horsemen and abominations, were considered especially ferocious in battle. Furthermore, these undead were far less afraid of death than even soul beasts, and they didn't know what pain and fear were. All they cared about was attacking manically. Under such circumstances, the situation was gradually developing towards one that was beneficial for Shrek City. Hui Yu Hao's spectral army was rapidly spent, but the undead creatures spawned continuously from behind. At this moment, the entire spectral army had charged onto the battlefield, and seemed endless as they charged madly towards the northwestern front. The Scarlet King and the Myriad Demon King had realized where the problem was at this point, but they still had to deal with the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion. Every single elder from the Sea God's Pavilion was a veteran of battle. Their age had given them much experience and made them resilient. Even though they could see what their reinforcements consisted of from the sky, at a time like this, it didn't matter why these unwelcome guests were here, because the enemy of their enemy was their friend. The army of soul beasts was the greatest threat to Shrek City. Therefore, they tried their best to preoccupy and restrain those powerful soul beasts, so that they couldn't direct the soul beast army, and so that they wouldn't participate in the battle against the undead creatures. The Eye of the Azura quivered and finally descended from the sky, landing on the ground as it reverted to Hui Yu Hao's original figure. The black gates closed up one after another. Hui Yu Hao's spiritual power was almost completely spent. He had no choice but to stop the spectral calamity. Hu Yuhao still felt a little afraid as he stared at the immense army of undead. He knew that his body couldn't keep up with his current spiritual power. If he used this necromantic spell as a title Doluor, he would probably be more frightening than any evil soul master, as he would possess an army of undead that was truly endless. If he could have powerful undead like liches and bone dragons, he could directly convert living beings into undead after death, and he would possess the strength to fight against powerful opponents. This thought disappeared as soon as it appeared in Hu Yuhao's mind. The pursuit of strength and greatness made him momentarily excited, but he broke out in a cold sweat in the next moment, because he remembered something that Electrolux had told him before. Electrolux had told him that he couldn't rely on this powerful ability to control undead. Otherwise, disaster and bloodshed would befall the continent if Hu Yuhao lost control of his undead army. That was very much something that he did not want to see. Hu Yuhao crossed his legs and sat down. He turned his sight inwards and withdrew his soul rings into his body. After his last rose gold and red soul ring entered his body, he became entirely transparent, before he disappeared into the air, just like that. Concrete material spiritual power allowed his million-year soul ring from the Sky Dream Iceworm to evolve once more. Imitation had become part of his innate abilities, and even though his spiritual power was almost entirely spent, imitation would still naturally protect him. Hu Yuhao could not be thinking about how much damage his undead army could do to the army of soul beasts. His top priority at the moment was to recover his spiritual power as quickly as possible, so that he could continue working hard to defend Shrek City. Bai Ji could see what was happening on the northwestern front, but she couldn't leave her own side behind, because they needed her protection. Intel passed from soul beast to soul beast and eventually to her, and she quickly found out the details about what was happening. The Emerald Swan's elegant face became ghastly pale. Where did this army of undead come from? Are they controlled by humans? If so, how frightening is that? She felt her heart ache as she watched soul beasts die one after another. Their losses had far exceeded their previous estimations. The beast god Di Qian knew that Shrek would be hard to deal with. Therefore, he had personally engaged in battle as soon as possible so that he could take out Shrek's most ferocious fighting strength as quickly as possible. Soul beasts weren't entirely shut off from the world. At the very least, they knew about Elder Mu's death. However, Shrek's hidden strength still exceeded their judgment. Elder Mu's spirit was still around, and he had teamed up with Elder Xian to seal Di Qian away. This had rendered the army of soul beasts leaderless, and they could only fight independently in terms of commandeering their fellow soul beasts. That wasn't all. Those stationary soul cannon shells fired from Shrek City brought unimaginable pain and damage to the army of soul beasts. Many soul beasts, even top-tier soul beasts, didn't know what was going on before they were turned into dust. Several thousand stationary soul cannon shells. These shells had caused more damage and injuries to the soul beasts than the frontline combat. More than 1 million soul beasts resided in the Great Star Do Forest, but most of them were between 10 to 100 years old, while some couldn't even be considered soul beasts. This time, even though the Great Star Do Forest's soul beasts had swarmed out, they had only mobilized about 400,000 soul beasts. Among them had been more than 300,000 soul beasts, who had between 10 to 100 years of cultivation. But now, how many soul beasts were left? There were less than 200,000 soul beasts remaining, which meant more than 40% of the soul beast army had perished on the battlefield. They were only assaulting a single human city. Shrek City wasn't considered a large-scale city, like the various empires' capital cities, but it had already caused so much damage to the Great Star Do Forest's soul beasts. More than 100,000 of the soul beasts, who had perished, died from those stationary soul cannon shells. At this moment, the flatlands all around Shrek City were strewn with the carcasses of soul beasts. Some soul rings had been extinguished due to time, but new soul rings drifted out from other soul beasts who had just died. So what if they emerged victorious in this battle? Could they still charge into the human world like they had imagined at the start, so that they could weaken humans as much as possible? It was no longer possible. Bai Ji was clear that even if they won this battle, the soul beasts wouldn't gain much from this victory. After all, there wasn't much in the human world that soul beasts desired. The soul beasts were only fighting for their survival. But what were they going to do after this battle? Were they to continue fighting? Unless they didn't want the Great Star Do Forest to survive, continuing to fight would only lead to their own death and destruction. Di Qian was powerful, but he couldn't fight against the entire world by himself. Shrek Academy had their ways to restrict him, but did the other empires in the Doluo continent not have similar methods? Therefore, even if the soul beasts could annihilate Shrek City, the Great Star Do Forest's soul beasts could only retreat back into the forest. This beast tide had become meaningless after their losses amounted to more than 40% of their total forces. They didn't weaken the humans. Instead, the humans dealt a heavy blow to the strength accumulated over 10,000 years by the Great Star Do Forest. What do I do? What should I do? Bai Ji was lost. She could only command her kinsmen, as she unleashed healing soul skills one after another, so that she could save as many of her compatriots' lives as possible. The undead army was still fighting. Their battle against the soul beasts was like the soul beasts' battle against Shrek City's warriors. The army of undead suffered massive losses, and 10 undead had to die to kill one soul beast. But so what? Hui Yuhao had relied on his formidable spiritual power, and the demiplane that the Calamity Necromancer Electrolux had left behind for him, and summoned 100,000 low-tier undead creatures. If these undead clashed with the army of soul beasts in a frontal battlefield, those undead would be rapidly overrun. However, the soul beast army had been fighting for 2 days and 2 nights, while the top-tier soul beasts were currently preoccupied in battles with Shrek Academy's elites on the other side. Under such circumstances, what could the other soul beasts do? 100,000 undead charging through their ranks, and the disturbance they caused was enough to affect the tide of battle. Furthermore, even though those undead didn't know how to cooperate, injuries didn't really affect their fighting strength. Their point of entry was excellent, and the army of soul beasts on the western and northern fronts descended into chaos. Their assault on Shrek City was now conspicuously weaker than before. Reinforcements were here. Shrek's warriors on the city walls didn't know that an army of undead was their reinforcements, but the soul beasts' slowing charge reinvigorated their spirits. The soul beasts who had climbed to the top of these two sides were forced back down, and some soul masters, who were no longer preoccupied, took this temporary break to recover their soul power. A furious and deafening roar echoed high up in the sky. Golden yellow clouds rolled in the sky, and an enormous figure could be faintly seen struggling in the clouds. Di Qian couldn't participate in the battle below, but his formidable strength meant he still had a connection to the army of soul beasts, and he could still feel their situation. He had discovered that things were going wrong, and he redoubled his efforts to break through the Daotai seal that Elder Xian and Elder Mu were using together to hold him down. The army of undead began to dwindle in number, and new ones no longer charged in from the distance. There were fewer and fewer undead, but the army of soul beasts that they were attacking was also dwindling. Time continued to pass as the soul beasts attacking on the northern and western fronts had their fighting strength greatly weakened. Boom, boom, boom. Black lighting detonated throughout the glowing clouds high up in the sky. Cracks began to appear in the sky. Di Qian was finally about to break out from his seal. Elder Mu and Elder Xian had restrained Di Qian for 3 days with the golden tree's support. However, the golden tree had consumed a lot of energy when it had healed the city soldiers, and when it forcibly repelled the soul beasts, which were flooding in. Furthermore, Di Qian could feel the dire situation that his kinsmen were in, and he couldn't be bothered with his own injuries as he tried to break out of the seal at any cost. The seal was about to crumble. The soul beasts were galvanized a little when they heard Di Qian's roar. The Emerald Swan communicated with the other 3 savage beasts across the battlefield, and finally gave the order to temporarily retreat. The swarming beast tide gradually retreated, but they circled around Shrek City to the northwest as they retreated. They would have to resolve the problems behind them if they wanted to exert any pressure in front of them. Even though they didn't know where the army of undead had come from, these things were far too irritating. Their assault on Shrek City could stop for now, but they had to exterminate these unwelcome guests, no matter what. What happened afterwards proved the gap between the undead army and the soul beast army. When the army of soul beasts from all 4 fronts surrounded them, it didn't take more than 15 minutes for them to overrun the army of undead, until there wasn't a single unliving creature left. Even now, not many people could see who their reinforcements were from the top of Shrek City's walls. The soul beasts had retreated, but they didn't move too far away. They began to eat the carcasses of the soul beasts that had died to replenish themselves. The 4 savage beasts finally rendezvoused with one another. They didn't speak at all, and their faces looked as black as could be. They had lost this battle, and the immense losses they had sustained were heavy blows to the Great Star Do Forest's vitality. This was especially true since the auspicious Emperor Beast, the 3-eyed golden lion, had passed away. They were all waiting for Di Qian to break out of his seal. Only the beast god could make the final decision about whether they should attack or retreat. The top of Shrek's city walls were wretched and in tatters. In the same moment that the army of soul beasts retreated, everyone slumped to the ground on the city walls. This included soldiers, soul masters, and even Shrek Academy students and teachers from the inner courtyard. They had been locked in bitter combat for a day and a night, and they had consumed far too much energy in both mind and body. At this moment, there was hardly anyone who could still stand on Shrek's city walls. The boost to morale brought about by the arrival of reinforcements vanished with the soul beast's retreat, and only surging exhaustion and fatigue were left behind. The four savage beasts didn't know this, but if they had continued with another assault at this moment, they would probably have achieved impressive results. Everyone from the Tang sect was also slumped limply on the ground. This group included Nan Shui, Nan Qiuqiu, and Yi Gai. Everyone's clothes were stained with the blood of soul beasts. Reality proved that the battle strategies that Bei Bei had arranged were very sensible. They relied on their mutual chemistry, and how close they were to each other to maintain themselves as one body even in the toughest of times. Nan Shui was a soul Doluo, and in addition to Yi Gai and Nan Qiuqiu, the three of them became effective reinforcements. Even though everyone was injured, everyone managed to survive. Ji Juechen became the most brilliant celebrity on the southern city wall after this battle. He had killed countless soul beasts with his judgment sword, and there were many warriors and soul masters from Shrek's city defense army who were hollering, "Sword God." At this moment, their sword god couldn't keep himself together anymore, and he panted heavily as he leaned against the battlement. However, not a single tinge of exhaustion could be seen in his eyes, there was only excitement. Yes, he had managed to achieve a better understanding of swordplay through this battle, and had achieved some breakthroughs with his own strength. Ever since he got together with Jing Ziyan, many new things had been added to his life. This time, he had relied on this continuous battle and danger to infuse these new elements into his sword intent. For him, doing so was more important than raising his soul power. Bei Bei was also panting in similar fashion, but there was a look of anxiety on his face as he stared into the sky. Shrek's perils hadn't been completely resolved. "Look, what's that?" Shu Sancha suddenly raised his hand forcibly and pointed into the sky. Everyone followed the direction his finger was pointing, and could see a shadow soaring through the air in the distance. This shadow came straight for Shrek City, and descended to the city wall. A trail of green flames flickering with strange images followed behind this shadow. The green flames were the mark of Shrek. It also meant that this person, who was flying back from a distance, was friendly. Reinforcements. Everyone's eyes sparkled when they thought about Elder Song's exclamation from before. Shrek's city walls were swimming with victims who were wounded and exhausted, but the soul beasts had suffered far heavier losses than Shrek did. Quite a few soul masters had perished in battle, but there were a lot more who had survived. The Tang sect's members quivered when they felt a wave of peculiar spiritual undulations, and the shadow that was flying through the air landed beside them. The night was dark, but this shadow carried Shrek's green signal, so his soaring figure was glaringly clear. This person quickly descended from the sky and landed on top of the city wall. Furthermore, he landed amid the Tang sect's members. Yu Hao. Everyone from the Tang sect was mired in extreme exhaustion at this moment, but they couldn't help but exclaim in pleasant surprise when they saw him. Yes. Wasn't that Hui Yu Hao who was descending from the sky? Hui Yu Hao had recovered his spiritual power, and sensed the changes in Shrek City at the same time. He had managed to escape from under the Evil Eye Tyrant King's nose, so it wasn't hard to imagine how strong his spiritual power was. When he discovered that the army of soul beasts had temporarily retreated, he flew to Shrek City without hesitation. Of course, he took a long detour to avoid the soul beasts that were concentrated on the northwestern front, and arrived on the southern side of the city. He used spiritual detection and quickly found his buddies. Eldest senior brother, second senior brother, third senior brother. I'm back. Tears welled up in Hui Yu Hao's eyes when he saw his buddies strewn all over the ground. However, he didn't sob out loud. Instead, he swiftly released his spiritual power to check on everyone's wounds. He heaved a sigh of relief when he was sure that everyone was more or less fine, and sat down beside Bei Bei. Bei Bei stared at Hui Yu Hao and forced a laugh as he said, "You're back after all, Yu Hao. You've really caused quite a disaster this time." Hui Yu Hao forced a laugh too and said, "I know, and I'm sorry. Eldest senior brother, I." Shu Sancha said, that's enough, Bei Bei. How can you blame Yu Hao for this disaster? He didn't know that Chioa was the three-eyed golden lion. Are you saying that our Yu Hao was supposed to die instead? Bei Bei turned towards Hui Yu Hao and sighed faintly. You shouldn't have come back. Hui Yu Hao gazed back at Bei Bei and said, I had to come back, eldest senior brother. Bei Bei glared at him. The beast tide is still here. Haven't you considered that you'll create a spark for Shrek and the Tang sect? Hui Yu Hao looked up at the gash in the sky that was becoming larger and larger. Is that Elder Xian sealing away Di Qian? This beast tide should be ending soon. Excitement flowed in Bei Bei's eyes. He shook his head and said, No, Elder Xian isn't the only one. Our ancestor is also there. Ancestor? Hui Yu Hao was momentarily stunned before he recovered. His eyes sparkled as he asked, You're saying, our teacher is there too? Hui Yu Hao's emotions rippled, and everyone from the Tang sect around him instantly felt a wave of flourishing spiritual pressure radiate from his body, shaking everyone's hearts. Bei Bei exclaimed in astonishment, Yu Hao, your spiritual power. Hui Yu Hao couldn't care about anything else, and quickly rushed over in front of Bei Bei before squatting down. Eldest senior, did you mention earlier that teacher sealed the beast god Di Qian? Bei Bei nodded and answered, yes. Although my great-grandfather has already passed away, he sealed his spirit in the golden tree. When the beast wave started, and Di Qian attacked, Elder Xian wasn't able to handle him on his own, and my great-grandfather used the power of the golden tree to seal Di Qian along with Elder Xian. Teacher. Hui Yu Hao peered into the sky and the emotions that he had been suppressing finally burst out. His tears flowed, and he knelt down as he continued staring up into the sky. At this point, a deafening boom echoed across the sky. Following this, a huge golden figure separated itself from the sky before descending towards Shrek City. The entire sky instantly turned dark, and an indescribable, yet terrifying aura descended from the sky. Di Qian had finally broken the seal. Furious dragon roars resonated across the sky, and patches of purple burned in the sky around him. That golden figure that had separated itself from the sky turned back into its human form. It was Elder Xian, and the projection of Elder Mu subtly surfaced beside him. However, he was much, much weaker than before. He also seemed very pale, and there were fresh bloodstains around his lips. Sealing the golden eyes Black Dragon King, whose cultivation exceeded 800,000 years, had overstimulated his blood, and Elder Xian was also greatly drained in the process. Just like Di Qian could sense what was happening in the outside world, Elder Mu and Elder Xian could do the same, too. Even they didn't expect that Shrek City could hold on without reinforcements, given the ferocious beast wave. They had also inflicted many casualties on the Great Star Do Forest side. More than 40% of the Soul Beast army had been killed. This was an extremely heavy blow to the forest. While Elder Mu and Elder Xian were very proud of Shrek's fighting strength, they didn't think this was a good thing. This situation virtually compelled Di Qian and the Great Star Do Forest to wipe out Shrek completely. Even if the Soul Beasts had to retreat, they wouldn't be willing to spare Shrek after the immense losses that Shrek had inflicted on them. Di Qian was so furious that he was close to going berserk. There was no point in saying anything else at this moment. While the Soul Beast armies on the northern and western sides were greatly fatigued, the Beast God's mighty aura was finally felt again, and they distributed themselves once again under the command of the four savage beasts. The Soul Beast army on the western side displayed an attacking formation, and was waiting for Di Qian's order. At this point, spots of light started to appear in the distance. These spots were very attention-catching, though there weren't many of them. At least, there weren't more than the spectral army Hui Yu Hao had summoned. However, they managed to fly over rapidly even as they faced Di Qian's immense suppression. This was especially true for a green spot that was flying in the front. It was like a shooting star. Furthermore, it expanded in size as it charged forward. Slowly, it turned into a huge, green fireball. Even against Di Qian's suppression, it still continued to burst forward. Di Qian, you have to see whether I agree if you want to destroy Shrek. Let's fight again after 100 years. A vigorous voice called out, resonating across the entire sky, and a huge patch of green light instantly filled the sky. Di Qian's immense suppression was forcefully resisted just like that. After hearing this voice, Elder Xian's tense face relaxed a little. Reinforcements had finally arrived. He was both very disgusted and irked by the owner of that voice. However, it sounded extremely cordial to him right now. How many people were there in the Doluor continent that could resist the beast god's suppression on his own? The owner of that voice was none other than the sect leader of the body sect, the body Doluor Dubuzi. Yes, the body sect had arrived as reinforcements. Whether it was Elder Xian, Elder Mi, or the elders from the Sea God's Pavilion, no one had expected the body sect to be the first to arrive as reinforcements. Shrek Academy and the body sect didn't share a harmonious relationship. The fight between Elder Mu and Dubuzi's brother was a painful and tragic memory for both parties. Elder Mu's back was bent out of shape following that fight, and he eventually passed away from his condition, while Dubuzi's brother died early. While this hatred between both parties wasn't unforgettable, it was still deeply remembered. However, Dubuzi actually arrived just when Shrek Academy needed help the most. It hadn't even been 2 days. Even if news was passed down to them immediately, and they set off immediately, they might not have been so quick. Dubuzi's cultivation was slightly superior to Elder Xian's, and he was already an ultimate Doluor. Even though he had just become an ultimate Doluor, and his abilities were weaker than the Darkness Holy Dragon and the Dragon Emperor Doluor Long Xiaoyao, he was still one of the strongest soul masters in the world right now. Even though Di Qian, who was already hurt after breaking the seal, could still defeat him, he wouldn't be able to do it quickly. With Dubuzi's presence, Di Qian was going to be kept busy, and there was no better news than this. Dubuzi, it's you again. Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish. Di Qian's furious roar echoed across the entire sky. The dark night sky suddenly turned purple. Even the green that Dubuzi released couldn't conceal this purple glow. All of Shrek City and the carcasses of soul beasts outside the city were dyed purple. Huge purplish bubbles started to descend from the sky, each of them with a diameter of more than 10 meters. They released thick purplish fog, and these bubbles engulfed the entire surface area of Shrek City together. Outside Shrek City, the Soul Beast army led by the 4 savage beasts quickly retreated. The Soul Beasts quieted down and ceased their furious roars. Every Soul Beast from the Soul Beast army seemed to have its mouth sealed, and didn't dare to utter any sound. Dubuzi had just arrived. He initially thought that he could scare Di Qian slightly along with the rest of the strong Soul Masters from Shrek. He hadn't expected the Beast God to make a move immediately. He didn't understand why Di Qian was so furious, either. When Di Qian was sealed earlier, he could only sense that the Soul Beast army had suffered heavy losses, but he couldn't completely tell what the extent of those losses was. Earlier, he had immediately used his spiritual sense to scan the entire area. When he saw the devastation and discovered that more than 40% of his army had been killed, he was infuriated. Just like Elder Xian and Elder Mu believed, this fight couldn't be reversed anymore. Even if the beast wave retreated, this blood vengeance still had to be avenged. Di Qian was naturally aware of Dubuzi's abilities. However, he was already extremely furious. No matter who came, he would still take action. He was willing to sacrifice everything to destroy Shrek. Dubuzi wore a serious look on his face. As he moved, he transformed into a 100-meter-tall giant in the air. Intense green lights shone from his body. Amidst these green lights, there was a subtle golden glow. From the looks of it, this giant was like a serious and solemn godly statue. He didn't dare to hold back against a strong opponent like Di Qian. The moment he appeared, he immediately activated the second awakening of his body soul. He unleashed his terrifying fighting strength and mimicked a lifting action. Streaks of green light were released from his body as they attacked the purplish bubbles in the sky. Every streak of green light managed to accurately locate a purplish bubble. Similarly, the streaks of green light engulfed the entire place. Green and purple were clearly separated. However, Di Qian's purplish bubbles seemed to overwhelm the green lights unleashed by Dubuzi. It was Di Qian's Black Dragon Annihilation, which was also his strongest area attack. He rarely used this soul skill. Every time he used this soul skill, he would lose some of his longevity. Even though he had already lived for more than 800,000 years, his regard for his own life was still greater than other savage beasts. Right now, he used this soul skill because he was furious. This showed the extent of his hatred. Dubuzi's green lights weren't weak, either. They were called Banquet of Death, and were his 8th soul skill. Every streak of green light was filled with poison, and it was one of his strongest area attacks. Green against purple, Banquet of Death against Black Dragon Annihilation. Both parties clashed at this moment. The purplish bubbles were unexpectedly weak. They burst immediately after contacting the green lights. However, the purplish bubbles transformed into countless, smaller bubbles after bursting, and descended at an even quicker speed. It was as if the bubbles were raining down. The green lights also transformed after contacting the purplish bubbles. They turned into green whirlpools, and their corrosive strength instantly spread out. Many small purplish bubbles were devoured by these green whirlpools, but the whirlpools were also quickly destroyed after devouring the bubbles. This was a clash of strength. There wasn't any flashiness in it. The green lights and whirlpools were eventually all put out by the purplish bubbles. There was still 1/3 of the initial purplish bubbles remaining, and they continued to descend from the sky towards Shrek City. Streaks of light were released from Shrek City to resist these purplish bubbles. They were the work of the titled Doluor from Shrek Academy. However, the purplish bubbles were too strong and domineering. Tremendous booms started to echo from every corner of Shrek City. Groans started to sound from all directions. The purplish bubbles managed to hurt 6 to 7 titled Doluor to varying degrees, and drained their power. This was the strength of Di Tien, the Golden Eyes Black Dragon King, and Beast God. In mid-air, Dubuzi also appeared extremely dismal as he suffered the greatest impact. He groaned and picked himself up before charging towards Di Tien. He now stood before the Beast God. At this point, the reinforcements arrived. The strongest soul masters from the body sect were flying in front. All of them had at least 7 rings, and there were even 8 titled Doluor among them. It was practically the entire strength of the body sect. This help that they were offering was extremely critical. Furthermore, it wasn't just the body sect that had arrived. There were more than 100 soul masters behind them, and they all had at least 6 rings. Among them, 5 were even titled Doluor. This meant that there were 13 titled Doluor in this wave of reinforcements. In addition, all these soul masters were top-tier soul masters. After they arrived in Shrek City, they quickly dispersed to the 4 walls. All the titled Doluor rose into the sky and watched as the body Doluor fought the Beast God. One of the titled Doluos arrived in front of Elder Xian. Elder Xian, I hope we're not too late. Elder Xian recognized this person. He was the golden body Doluor from the body sect, and his martial soul was his trunk. His cultivation was extremely high. He was a rank 96 transcendent Doluor. In the body sect, he was only inferior to body Doluor Dubuzi. Old Jin, all of you came just in time. If you were any later, we wouldn't have been able to hold them off anymore. We really owe you a big favor. Elder Xian laughed heartily. The golden Doluor Jin Peng replied, all right, if you really want to talk about favors, you don't owe us anything. Do you think we came here willingly? To be honest, our sects aren't close enough for us to do this. Elder Xian was stunned, but admitted, that's true. This is why I was surprised to see all of you. This? Jin Peng said, Shrek Academy performed a good deed by saving everyone from the Heavenly Soul Empire, who was captured during the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament. Those who were captured were all young talents of our empire. We have to return this favor. It was that kid called Hu Yuhao from your academy, who came to our capital to seek help. He left immediately after leaving that information. However, those who were rescued recognized him as the one who brought people to Sunrise City to carry out the rescue mission. As a result, the sect leader was summoned by His Majesty. After a brief discussion, we quickly rushed over. As time was tight, we sent our best people first. There will be more reinforcements arriving at a later point. Our troops are at the border and they can't make it over, but we still have 1,000 soul masters who have been deployed. Yuhao, it was Yuhao. Elder Xian was delighted when he heard that Hu Yuhao was the one who had sought help for them. This meant that Hu Yuhao was still alive. This was great news, and the reinforcements even arrived just in time. With the body sect and the Heavenly Soul Empire's help, Shrek would be able to last for another few days even if the Soul Beast army attacked Shrek City with all its might. Furthermore, could the Soul Beasts from the Great Star Do Forest bear such huge losses? Jin Peng continued speaking, the Star Luo and the Do Ling empires should receive your SOS soon. Their reinforcements will arrive in at most 2 days. What's going on with the Great Star Do Forest? Why is there another beast wave? Regardless, we'll take it that we've returned the favor after this. Elder Xian naturally didn't stand on ceremony right now. He nodded and replied, all right. Thanks a lot. This was karma. Shrek Academy had done its best to save the hostages from the 3 empires, and now they were repaying Shrek's favor. No wonder the body sect was here, they came here because of the Heavenly Soul Empire. Right now, the body sect was the sect in charge of protecting the Heavenly Soul Empire, and they shared a close relationship with the imperial family. Of course, the Heavenly Soul Empire's timely help to Shrek Academy was also an attempt for them to get into the good books of Shrek Academy. To some extent, Shrek Academy was located in the Heavenly Soul Empire's territory, and most of its students also came from the Heavenly Soul Empire. Many of the students that left Shrek took up senior positions in the Heavenly Soul Empire. The imperial family of the empire deciding to send help to Shrek Academy was undoubtedly a way of expressing their goodwill, and an attempt to pull Shrek Academy to their side. They were killing two birds with one stone. The most important thing was that Hu Yuhao managed to deliver the information in time. He had evidently guessed that there would be some kind of reaction by the Great Star Do Forest. However, if the beast wave didn't arrive, Elder Xian sighed in his heart. It would have been a story of the boy who cried wolf. Of course, that would still have been better than this. At most, they would have continued as enemies with the body sect. Is Di Qian crazy? Elder Mu's voice suddenly sounded beside Elder Xian. Elder Xian quickly lifted his head and looked into the sky. Di Qian's body was burning with deep purplish flames. He acted like he wanted to pierce the skies with every attack, and Dubuzi was forced to retreat. It seemed like Dubuzi couldn't hold on anymore. Di Qian's majestic aura was extremely overwhelming. Elder Xian's voice cracked as he asked, Is he burning his own life energy? Elder Mu replied, no, he should be exhausting all his powers. He has evidently discovered our reinforcements, and is planning to use his strength to turn the situation around. If Dubuzi can't handle it anymore, let's replace him. We need to restrain Di Qian at all costs. We won't have to be afraid of them in 2 days' time, when all our reinforcements arrive. The combination of all the elite soul masters and soldiers from the three empires should be enough to suppress all the soul beasts from the Great Star Do Forest. Before Elder Mu and Elder Xian could rise into the sky, an explosive boom sounded above them. Dubuzi was struck from the sky. His body was flashing with bolts of purple lightning, and he spat out blood. Di Qian had several wounds on his body, too. He was willing to be hurt in order to deal a heavy blow to Dubuzi. All of them have to die. We have to avenge the Emperor Beast and all the soul beasts. Even if I die here today, I must wipe all of them out. Di Qian's voice echoed across the entire city. He peered into the sky and roared furiously, while the purple flames on his body gradually turned purplish gold. Elder Xian and Elder Mu's expressions changed. Given Di Qian's 800,000-year cultivation, Shrek was bound to suffer heavy casualties even if the body sect was here to reinforce them. It might even be possible that the city would be destroyed, and everyone would be annihilated. After all, there were still 100,000 soul beasts outside the city. Di Qian, don't you dare. If you dare to destroy Shrek, I'll stop the legacy of the Great Star Do Forest from being passed down. At this point, a strong spiritual intent was suddenly transmitted from Shrek City's southern city wall. This spiritual intent immediately spread across the entire sky above Shrek City. All the title Doluor could hear it clearly, as could Di Qian. Following this, a figure that exuded golden light slowly drifted above the southern city wall. Behind him, a rose-gold projection slowly revealed itself. It had the appearance of the Emperor Beast, the three-eyed golden lion. Yuhao! Elder Mu and Elder Xian exclaimed at the same time. The shining spiritual intent and the person who rose into the sky was indeed Hu Yuhao. Right now, 7 of his soul rings glowed. They were white, purple, black, rose gold, and red. Everyone was shocked by the weird colors of his soul rings. As he rose into the sky, several figures leapt up one after another and followed him. Yang Xiaozhe, Cai Maya, Xian Lina, and the rest protected him in the center. Among them, Xian Lina was the first to realize that Hu Yuhao had returned. Only she could guess that the undead army that had dealt a huge blow to the Soul Beast army and bought time for Shrek had something to do with him. Xian Lina was glaring furiously as she shouted, Yuhao, don't fool around. How can you intervene in this higher-end fight? Hu Yuhao looked at her and took in a deep breath before saying, Dean Xian, everything started because of me. I can't watch as Shrek is obliterated. Believe me, I can resolve this. No. Xian Lina shouted and reached out her hand to grab him. However, a strange halo suddenly spread from Hu Yuhao's body. Xian Lina, Yang Xiaozhe, and Cai Maya felt slightly dizzy as they were caught off guard, and everything in front of their eyes turned white. Even though they were drained, Xian Lina and Yang Xiaozhe were transcendent Doluo. However, they momentarily lost their awareness. Hu Yuhao exploited this opportunity to increase his speed as he flew into the sky. The projection behind him also became more material. On his forehead, his eye of destiny opened, and immense spiritual undulations openly surged towards Di Qian. Rose gold light started to burn on his body. Comparing the purplish gold flames from Di Qian's body to the light on Hu Yuhao's body was like comparing a full moon to a firefly. However, the space around Hu Yuhao started to distort slightly when this little scarlet gold light started to burn. In the distance, the silent soul beast army started to cry out in lamentation. The flames on Di Qian's body suddenly froze, and he started at Hu Yuhao with his golden eyes. His furious roar turned into shock. You are the one who made the Emperor Beast an offering. It's you. Hu Yuhao raised his head and replied, yes, it's me. Chiao sacrificed herself for me and turned into my sixth soul ring. I also fused her abilities as the Emperor Beast into myself. You should know that the three-eyed golden lion carries the entire destiny of the great star Do Forest. While Chiao is dead, the legacy of the Emperor Beast is still here with me. Her eye of destiny is also with me. If I die, this power of destiny will be completely destroyed, which means that the destiny of the great star Do Forest will also be destroyed. You should know what kind of result that will bring. Ridiculous. Di Qian roared and reached forward with his claws. A strong purplish gold claw projection reached for Hu Yuhao. Part 1 end here.